And we can begin in 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order. I'm not able to turn things on and off again. Call to order the Pierce County Council on Tuesday study session. Today is August 25th, 2026. The time is 12:02 according to the clock in here. And all members are present, including Councilmember Ayala, who is online fighting a cold and doesn't want to share with us. Councilmember Ayala, thank you. Sharing is caring, but not with germs. So we have a regular agenda with a couple of presentations. They're council staff or council staff adjacent, so we're going to just do our normal operations. Unless there's objections from any of my colleagues, we'll just go through the agenda as presented. Not seeing any, so we will start with item number 2, which is review of today's council agenda. Ms. Long, we'll go to you.
All right, thank you and good afternoon. This is your amended meeting agenda for this afternoon's regular meeting. We did go over the consent agenda yesterday, but there are a couple of changes that I want to bring to your attention. So under introduction and scheduling, the first item you see there under ordinances is O 2026-534S. This was not on the agenda. Consent agenda yesterday. This is the endangerment with a controlled substance proposal. It was heard in committee yesterday and received a due pass recommendation, and it is now on your consent agenda to set the final council action for September 8th. And you'll also note that that O 2026-555, which contained a number of applications for open space classification, has been removed. We received information from the department that a few of the exhibits needed to be replaced, and they were in the process of doing that. So you'll probably see it on next week's consent agenda. So just took it off to make sure that gets done. And then you'll note that all of the grant applications that were discussed yesterday are appearing on your consent agenda. There are no proclamations this afternoon, so we'll move right to Section 8, resolutions, and you have R 2026-179, and this is a resolution initiating the appointment process to fill vacancies on the town council for the town of South Prairie. There is one amendment to this proposal. This received a due pass at rules on August 17th. Moving to Section 9, ordinances, you have quite a number of items here. The first is O 2026-553, and this is reauthorizing the Spanaway Lake Management District Number 1. This received a due pass recommendation at rules on August 17th. Number 2 is O 2026-545. This is amending Chapter 436 of the code entitled Claims and Actions by and Against the County. This received a due pass at rules on August 3rd. And the next 5 proposals are all collective bargaining agreements. All of these received due pass recommendations at rules on August 10th. The first is reached with Pierce County Corrections and Detention Center non-uniformed group, Local 3752CN. The second, which is O 2026-548, is with the Pierce County Deputy Sheriff's Independent Guild, Local 1889. The third is O 2026-549, and this is with the Juvenile Court Unit, Local 120J. And the next is O 2026-550. This is with the, the PAO, Local 120 PAO. And the last of these is O 2026-551. And this is with the Local 120 General Unit. Then you'll note a number 8. This is highlighted. This has been added. This is O 2026-557. This is an emergency ordinance of the Pierce County Council adopting a development moratoria pursuant to statute prohibiting the siting, expansion, or establishment of certain data centers, adopting a work plan to establish appropriate development regulations for data centers, and setting a public hearing and adopting findings of fact. And that is for final. And those are your agenda items for this afternoon's regular meeting.
Thank you. And I think it would be appropriate to have Mr. Kruger potentially walk through that resolution or that item because it is new and we haven't heard about it because it didn't go through a committee as it's being declared an emergency. So, Mr. Kruger.
Thank you, Chair. As the council knows, the council has the authority to adopt emergency ordinances, and under Growth Management Act, you have the authority to adopt development moratoria, providing, for lack of a better example, a timeout for the county to establish standards related to new or emerging technologies. In this case, this proposal would prohibit the county from accepting or approving a permit application for a data center that exceeds 10 megawatts of total capacity. A little bit of background on that. There really are 4 different scales of data centers that are being regulated throughout the country at the moment. This moratorium wouldn't impact the smaller facilities that are either kind of in-home data centers or for an individual business. This moratorium would only involve larger facilities where you have co-located data centers or the hyperscale facilities that you've probably heard something about that use large amounts of electricity and water. And so this proposal would create a moratorium for up to 1 year or until the county can come up with regulations to adequately address this emerging technology and zone for it in appropriate locations. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from council members and not debating the topic, but understanding? Vice Chair Herrera.
I just had a question. You said that we don't have any regulations at all, but we do have data centers that have been built here. What did they fall under?
So we do have a category of land use in the county that deals with computer electronic facilities. And so there are likely some small data centers that may have been permitted in the unincorporated county under those standards, but I will say that I'm not familiar with those. The only data center that I'm really familiar with in the county is the one up in South Hill near Pierce College, and that's in the city limits of Puyallup.
Yeah.
That would be that would actually be a smaller facility in the scheme of things related to some of what we see happening in some parts of Eastern Washington. There's some fairly large facilities going in, 20 megawatt facilities and larger. And then outside the state, we're seeing some hyperscale facilities that are hundreds of megawatts being installed in places. And the moratorium would impact those larger scale facilities.
Okay. Another question, if I may. I just wanted to make sure, and you did touch on it a little bit about emergency ordinances for quote emergencies. I just want to make sure that, is there any anticipated data centers that are said they're coming to Pierce County or that we have to act today, now, that this is an emergency? I just wanted to make sure that we're not abusing the emergency clause or whatnot.
I'm not familiar with any applications that are in the kind of pre-pipeline stage in Pierce County, but I can say that at least it's my understanding that there's been a lot of constituent inquiries that have come into council expressing concerns related to the lack of county regulations for data centers and asking for this type of a tool to be used. That's the background that I have in terms of PPW and their permitting pipeline and their experiences. I'm not familiar with anything that is on the cusp of coming in with an application.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, I know a lot of hospitals, colleges, education facilities are now building their own small data centers. Do you know if this 10 megawatts would prevent a hospital from having their own system?
It shouldn't, based upon the research I've done related to size. So So I can go over that briefly. There's, as I mentioned, there's about, in terms of industry standards, there's basically 4 types of data centers. There's micro facilities, which are typically in spaces less than 2,000 square feet. Probably would accommodate most of what I think you're referring to in terms of a hospital or a school, a couple thousand square feet of data center. Then there's enterprise facilities, which serve individual businesses. That can be larger, and in some cases, we see facilities up to about 50,000 square feet or more than an acre of those. Then we have, starting to get into the larger, there's co-location facilities, which can be as large as 10 acre sites as big as 10 acres. And then we have the hyperscale facilities, which is where the AI and the cloud are housed. And those can be massive, well over 10 acres. The capacity of those facilities are based upon IT load and electrical capacity. And so the smaller facilities, those micro facilities, use less than 2 megawatts. The enterprise facilities, which can be for these businesses, multiple businesses tying into a data center, range from 2 to 10 megawatts. Again, those would all be permissible, or at least not be subject to the moratorium as proposed. Then we get into the whole-scale co-location facilities, which are larger than 10 megawatts, and hyperscale facilities, which are more than 100 megawatts. And both of those scales of data centers would be subject to the moratorium.
Okay, thank you. I know the city of Tacoma has a couple of those co-location data centers, mainly that are in, I would say, more office buildings than industrial. So that would prohibit those also?
If they're larger than 10 megawatts, yeah.
Okay. And so, looking at that, I am, and I'm not going to debate the political merits of it. I'll save that for later. But I'm just, I'll just leave it at that. I won't go any further. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Kruger. Appreciate the clarification. Any other questions regarding, I know we had some questions about the grant yesterday. Is there any other questions from anyone regarding anything on the council agenda? Not seeing any. So then amendments, Ms. Long, were you going to go over the one amendment to?
Sure. So you have the hard copy in your packets today. I briefly mentioned it yesterday, and this is related to the eligibility requirements for service on the South Prairie Town Council. What's listed in your recitals cites the state law requirements. South Prairie has a provision in its municipal code that provides that a person is eligible to serve in an elected position in the town if they must have been a resident for 1 year prior to appointment or election. And so this clarifies in your recital, it strikes the 30 days, which is the state law provision, and inserts 1 year.
Okay. Any questions on this particular amendment? Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last bullet, is not currently incarcerated. Is that something that the town has?
Most of these are state law requirements.
These are state law requirements. So it doesn't preclude someone who has a felony conviction from serving?
No,
Okay.
assuming they can meet all the other requirements.
Okay. Who does the background check? Is that
On the
us,
town, I think
or
that's
is
up
it
to
the
the
town?
town.
So we get up to 3 folks that come in here, and we're going to pick one of them. How do we know that?
I mean, I think that we, with in the process that's outlined in the resolution, there is a committee to review all the applications. So I think some of that will be done through the committee as they vet the applications that we receive. And if they need staff assistance, we'll certainly assist with that and in coordination with the town.
Okay, I'm just want to make sure, because obviously we've had a issue come up with a appointment to the Parks Board on someone's background that wasn't divulged at the time of application. Are we able to ask questions about background?
You will be able to interview these candidates. Yes, absolutely. In a public meeting.
Okay, so we can ask a question like that?
You can ask questions as to their eligibility. Absolutely, yes.
Well, obviously, if their eligibility is only limited to these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, can we broaden that to inquire more about their background?
Yes, you can, and that would be, so that wouldn't, if there was something outside of the eligibility requirements, it wouldn't necessarily disqualify them, but it might affect your decision to support their appointment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I hope we get enough applicants that this actually takes like some time and some research, Councilmember Morrell, but we'll see. Any other questions on today's council agenda? Not seeing any. So external boards and commissions, Ms. Rhett Hunt let me know that there was nothing from her hat or her portfolio. So to my colleagues, is there anything from boards and commissions that we need to update on? So Board of Health met, I will go to Councilmember Krueger.
I think, if I can find it. I just was at the Nisqually River Council meeting. I usually don't discuss much on there, but it was kind of interesting because we learned about bullfrogs. So the Nisqually River Council are many groups under one umbrella, and they had a presentation on the invasive American bullfrog. And they are this huge creature, and the presenter said they're like 11, 12 centimeters, and I'm like, could you put that in inches? And he couldn't. So I'm like trying to figure it out. But somebody in the audience said it's like 6 to 8 inches in our metric system, our inches system. And it is one of the top 100 invasive species, according to the IUCN. And there's like a 10 to 20 year management plan trying to eradicate these creatures because they eat everything that they can, and they need money. But yeah, but they lay 15 to 20,000 eggs, and they may do one or more clutches per year, and they live in the wild about 10 years, or live in the wild about 10 years, and in captivity they could be 12 to 15 years. And there's also Pierce Conservation District did a report. They're in their gleaning phase of the season, and I guess they got a new van, so they have lots of ways to haul the food around that they get. And there's a few other things, but I just thought it was kind of interesting to learn about the bullfrog, the American bullfrog.
We need to get frog legs back on a bunch of menus or something.
Yeah, well, they came over on a ship. They came over for food, and I'm thinking, well, why don't you eat them?
Yeah. Okay. So, and then Board of Health met in retreat last week. Just for my colleagues who don't track what we are talking about, one of the items that we discussed during retreat was the current interlocal agreement between Tacoma and the county, and really started to look at some of the items that are very out of date, like because the rules have actually changed around how you do ILAs. There's some things that we need to change, and so have started a very careful and thoughtful way of doing that because there's lots of feelings in the community around the health department and the last time it was discussed. So just flagging that happened in case constituents reach out or so that you're aware. I have under chair's topics, just a reminder that, well, actually, tomorrow's performance audit, I know not everybody's on performance audit, but we internally, our staff they've been working towards the overview of the Behavioral Health and Therapeutic Courts tax. And so this is kind of an initial kind of teaser on some of the information that's been pulled together. So whether you watch it, the recording later or even just looking at the packet, there was a really nice mapping done of where the money goes, which many of us, because it goes to so many different entities, that was one of the things we asked our performance audit staff to do, and they did it. And you got to blow it up because it's large with tiny print, but it is really interesting to kind of look at it in a visual map about where and how we invest. So just flagging that. So under other business, we're going to go to Mr. Dominique for an update first, and then Jacob, you're on.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council, Brian Dominique, council staff. In your packet today is a proclamation proclaiming September 2026 as Bridge to Hope Suicide Prevention Month in Pierce County, Washington. The council and executive have historically declared September 2026 Suicide Prevention Month. The Bridge to Hope comes from the Pierce County Council partnering to support the first annual Pierce County Suicide Prevention Summit and 5K Awareness Walk Run. That is a free community event on Friday, September 18th, 2026 at the Penn Met Parks Recreation Center in Gig Harbor. It offers continuing education for service providers and a welcoming space for community members and families to learn how to recognize the warning signs, safeguard loved ones, and share messages of hope, concluding the summit with a Bridge to Hope 5K over the Tacoma Narrows Bridge and an American Foundation for Suicide Prevention bead ceremony. The proclamation speaks of current statistics. In 2024, 1,221 Washington residents died by suicide, a rate of about 14.5 for every 100,000 people. And from 2020 through 2024, 749 people died by suicide in Pierce County, having ripple effects on our schools, families, communities, and military and veteran communities, as Pierce County shares a deep connection to our military and veteran community. Pending any questions, this proclamation is open for amendments for the next 48 hours. If you'd like to make any changes, please let me know and I'll incorporate that. It heads to the Rules and Operations Committee on Monday for scheduling and approval. And then it will be read at the September 9th in-district meeting in District 2. We normally try to get these month-long observances right before or right at the beginning of the month, but because there's a special event that's happening in conjunction with this proclamation, we're trying to get it closer to that date. And then having this out in community also adds some reference to the event. So pending any questions, that's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Dominique on this one? Not seeing any, so please get with him if you do have comments or questions or find anything that needs edits, and we'll take it up at Rules. So we'll move on to item B, which is council interim presentation. Jacob Kadali is here to share all of his good work and learning around a project that we all really like, and we're excited to see what he learned.
Great. Can you hear me well? Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, council members. My name is, of course, Jacob Kadali, and I've had the privilege to be your research and policy intern for this summer, and I will be talking about my analysis of the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program.
We're working on it.
Yep. Yeah. no problem. Next slide, please. Today, we'll be going over the history of the program over time to see how the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program, or NTSP for short, functioned beforehand and how it's changed over time. Then we'll look at the current state of traffic safety here in Pierce County. And then finally, I'll be talking about the 3 levels of policy recommendations that I'm offering today, along with other future areas of work. Next slide, please. So let's first talk about the principles that have guided the county's work surrounding traffic safety. The first of which is the 3 E's of traffic safety. That is education, engineering, and enforcement. Education is focused on teaching driving safely through public campaigns. Engineering is focused on building and enhancing the features of the road for safety through things such as traffic control devices like speed bumps, street lights, and signage. Enforcement is focused on ticketing and disincentivizing bad driving behavior through enhanced traffic enforcement in speeding hotspots by having sheriffs present in the area where speeding is occurring. Next slide, please. Here in Pierce County, we have the highest rate of traffic deaths for large counties in Washington state per capita, based on an analysis done on crashes between 2018 to 2023. In addition, staffing shortages have meant that the sheriff's office has had to pause traffic enforcement requests. And of the 611 fatal and serious injury crashes, or FSI crashes for short, 209 have occurred on or within 100 feet of a local road. Listed below are the various traffic safety initiatives of the county, including the Large Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, and its subcategories, such as Blue Zones, Vision Zero, Safe Routes to School, and other TIP projects. It's also important to note that the NTSP is completely separate and significantly smaller. Of course, as you all may know, it was established in 2012 to focus on small spot safety improvements. And whereas the TIP is housed under PPW, the NTSP is housed under your council members' offices. Next slide, please. Before I head into the history of the program, here's how I broke down the analysis of the NTSP. The first part is the initiation process, basically how constituents can bring up these concerns. And then the second level is the selection process, basically how governments screen and prioritize traffic safety concerns. And finally, the third level is that of community involvement. How and to what extent do we engage with the public on the issue of traffic safety? With that, let's look at how the NTSP functioned before. Next slide, please. In my consultation of the history of the NTSP, I interviewed 3 former chairs shown on the screen, and when asked about how they gained feedback surrounding traffic safety concerns, they stated that they relied heavily on emails and calls from constituents, but some also relied on having public meetings with a Planning and Public Works rep in different community centers as well. All had said that the scope should be focused on small, low-hanging fruit, such as streetlights or signs. And when it came to prioritizing which final projects to put on their list, there was ample discretion given to council members. However, they would often continue to rely on talking with Planning and Public Works staff to figure out what's possible in certain cases. And when it came to community involvement, that of course varied greatly, with former Chair Richardson engaging strongly with the community by having public meetings in Parkland Spanaway prior to the creation of the final project lists, while others decided to follow a more internal approach to their decisions. Next slide, please. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a significant increase in reckless driving behavior such as speeding. As a result, the type of traffic safety project taken up reflects this. In 2015, streetlights were the name of the game, with 14 of them being installed. That number dropped to 1 in 2025. But traffic calming evaluations, that is, any evaluation that was focused on determining how to reduce speeding through alterations to the road, grew significantly from 4 in 2015 to 14 in 2025. This leaves us in an incredibly constrained environment, of course, because if much of the NTSP funds is focused for these studies, little money is actually left to install traffic control devices. This past year alone, of the 22 total projects that were funded under the NTSP, only 5 were actual traffic control devices. Now, this brings us to the current state of the program. Next slide, please. Next slide. In my analysis of the various issues of the process, I consulted not only with you council members, but also a wide array of community organizations, county departments, traffic safety experts, and traffic safety departments in other counties. Next slide. Some of the issues identified when it came to the initiation process were that there was no public information about the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program on the county's website and on the Neighborhood Traffic Safety subsite. In addition, there was no centralized approach for tracking traffic safety concerns in council member offices, thus requiring a little bit more time on the policy staff side to gather the correspondence with constituents and to compile a final list of projects from council member offices. Finally, there was no uniform or accessible approach to responding to constituents' traffic safety concerns, meaning it seemed difficult to bring up concerns for people who did not know about the process, and more internally, it causes certain issues with having no unified response, because it creates issues with relaying clear and correct answers to constituents and often leads to feelings of frustration and distrust with the government. Next slide, please. When it came to selecting and prioritizing projects, the main issues were that there was a lack of understanding about what the scope of the program is, which projects qualify based on the Office of the County Engineer and all the various other traffic safety initiatives, and information surrounding what traffic control devices should be used is hard to relay to the public in a succinct and a correct manner. And while most council members emphasize that projects should be focused on the most public benefit, only 35% of projects actually occurred at or nearby high risk or high injury local roads. Next slide, please. Finally, when it came to community involvement, the following issues were identified. Of the community organizations that were talked to, all of them had expressed a lack of awareness of the program, but were still willing to be more involved in the decision-making process should they be allowed to do so. None of the people spoken from community organizations felt as though their neighbors or even themselves knew about traffic control devices, which to use them, when to use them. And as stated before, this information is often hard to synthesize. Now let's go ahead and head on to the policy recommendations. Next slide, please. These recommendations were broken down into 3 levels, and this is done so because they vary in the amount of council member discretion, community involvement, and the extent and scope of the program in the future. And this analysis was done based off of my research of 14 different jurisdictions that you can see in the report later on, but 11 of them were in Washington State, and most of them were in Pierce County or close to Pierce County. Next slide, please. Level 1 is focused on enhancing decision-making tools, and this level has the highest amount of council member discretion and keeps the NTSP relatively small in scale. Under level 1, the main improvement for the initiation process is updating the information on the SeeClickFix site by getting rid of the reference to the Sheriff's Traffic Division for any requests for enhanced traffic enforcement. It also suggests that council members redirect constituents to this form to fill out and centralize information later on. Next slide, please. For the selection and prioritization process, it would focus on using a simple 3-factor prioritization criteria as a guiding tool to assist council members in their decision-making, and also using a council member assistant tracking sheet that can be edited and shared with staff for a quicker process of approval. This criteria was based off of the other jurisdictions that I had studied and their prioritization criteria. And as you can see, it follows a simple 3-factor analysis with 5 points given to the number of fatal and serious injury crashes in the area, 3 points to proximity to parks and schools, and 2 points to the Community Impact Index score. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering how you get this information, and that's with the NTSP's GIS dashboard tool. As I've just gone over it with most of you council members, I won't go too into depth, but once again, I'd emphasize that the aim is to have this as an easy one-stop shop to help determine a prioritization score for your council member assistants and for your offices. And it can also be retrofitted to be made public like the Vision Zero dashboard if you all find it beneficial. This falls in line with the data-based approach that much of the jurisdictions analyzed conduct already. Next slide, please. Along with this, in consultation with the Office of the County Engineer, I was able to put together an itemized cost list of some of the most commonly used traffic control devices. And this should kind of help you all in deciding which projects to fund based on the limited resources allocated. And moving on to community involvement. Next slide, please. In the realm of community involvement, level 1 would be focused on making information on the process of the NTSP more publicly available by putting it onto the county's website. And this should help in some small ways in educating a constituent who's trying to issue a concern. And many other counties have these toolkits publicly available on their county websites, such as Montgomery County as part of their Vision Zero initiative. Next slide, please. Level 2 is focused on community engagement and emphasizing the need to seek out more input from the public, along with using the pillar of education as an important part of combating traffic safety issues. In the initiation process, that looks like allowing for and prioritizing traffic safety petitions from homeowners associations, civic associations, and neighborhood groups. This is already conducted in different jurisdictions such as Snohomish County, Kitsap County, and the city of Puyallup. And the threshold for what is considered a valid group of residents is 25% in Kitsap County and ranges all the way up to 51% in the city of Puyallup. And this ensures that traffic safety concerns are urgent and brings awareness among the community. But it also means that in order for this to work, more community outreach is necessary. On the selection and prioritization side of things, this would also kick in a two-tier system, where the first tier would, of course, be focusing on projects from community groups, and the second tier would be focused on projects with individual traffic concerns. This tiered system is similar in structure to Tacoma's current traffic calming program. Next slide, please. The main bulk of change in level 2 is that of community involvement. And with this, I also proposed a community engagement plan on neighborhood traffic safety. This plan includes a series of public-facing traffic safety activities that the county can conduct in order to boost the public's knowledge of traffic safety in general. And this plan also calls for collaboration and integration with the work of existing departments and organizations who are already doing the work of community outreach in areas heavily impacted by traffic safety. So what do these activities kind of look like? It looks like walk audits for community members to better engage with their built environment in a critical lens, or tabling at community events and working with departments such as Long Range Planning or ORCA, who are already conducting outreach efforts to areas like Parkland Spanaway. And we can also leverage existing structures like the Transportation Advisory Commission to spread the word further to the public and industries impacted by this program. Next slide, please. It also looks like creating more educational content, physical materials, and surveys to increase visibility and community feedback. Included in the community engagement plan that you all will see later on are the foundations of some of these community outreach materials that can be further altered for future use. And so this includes things like yard signs focused on showing how slower is safer and how safe driving saves lives, or calls for feedback, which you could put onto your social media or newsletters whenever you want to tell other community members about the program. And also documents laying out the general process of the neighborhood traffic safety program overall. These all can work to form a more educational response to the county, to traffic safety issues that the county can utilize. Next slide, please. The third level is focused on altering the structure and scope of the NTSP to increase county capacity and collaboration. And for this, the initiation process focuses on, rather than getting traffic safety concerns and having the Office of the County Engineer send over traffic engineers directly to those sites, it instead would focus on working on GIS to make a traffic calming request eligibility screening tool. And this idea came from the city of Pittsburgh's traffic calming request tool, which allows people to click or locate street segments that they would like work on, and it immediately shows whether or not that street section is eligible or ineligible for a traffic calming request. And this can, of course, shorten the first part of the NTSP processing incredibly quickly because it already notifies the public and the constituents whether or not their street is eligible. Next slide, please. For the selection and prioritization process, there are a couple of ways to improve county capacity through efficiency improvements and collaboration. In Kitsap County, they host frequent meetings with their county engineers, their sheriff's traffic enforcement division, and policymakers. And this helps kind of form a more unified approach to traffic safety. One of the best tools I found to boost efficiency for this program, however, is Street Vision. It's a behavioral driving analytics tool that's currently being used by 55 different government entities in Washington state. This tool has the ability to be used as an assisting screening device for assessing things like roads, speeds, and volume. And it reduces the need to send over county engineers to conduct strenuous speed and traffic calming studies. It does so by working with 25 of the largest auto insurance companies to get driver data for those who opt into driving behavior tracking programs for lower insurance rates. And the turnaround time for learning this type of tool is relatively quick, with someone able to get a good grasp of it within 6 to 8 weeks. Next slide, please. Level 3 would also focus on one significant adjustment to structure, and that's housing this program under PPW rather than the county council. This has the potential to increase the capacity to conduct community engagement work by conjoining it with community engagement under the current Vision Zero outreach, and also shift the work of screening complaints fully away from council member assistants and council member offices and policy staff and onto PPW. I also want to note, however, that this level does still allow for council members to have some discretion at the final stage of the process. For example, this looks like in Montgomery County, the analysis work being conducted under their Public Works Department, but the final list of projects and the final approval still heading for a vote to their commissioners' offices. This allows for decision makers to shift certain priorities or add on or change around certain projects that did not match or align with the Public Works Department, but still puts the vast majority of the analysis of it into their Public Works Department. Next slide, please. Now, this next section is focused on the identification of grant opportunities and other indirect policy areas related to traffic safety I came across in my research. If the county were to focus on level 3 and working on all levels to enhance education and enforcement, there is a federal grant called the Innovative Traffic Safety Enforcement Grant that's given to counties that show a promising program that can be scalable for counties across the United States. And they put particular emphasis to programs that take a, quote, clear, evidence-based, and data-driven approach. Funding is between $500,000 to $2 million, and applications just recently opened last month. This can be used to help build out our educational traffic safety outreach and also fund a transition to a more integrated traffic safety approach with law enforcement. Next slide, please. Another resource that could be beneficial is the Washington Traffic Safety Commission's permit application to use one of their free licenses for Street Vision. They currently have a couple of vacancies available, and it allows local government departments access to the Street Vision tool so long as you agree to provide feedback on whether or not the tool has been beneficial to the work of your department or your program. Next slide, please. As you look towards enhancing traffic safety in the future, I also wanted to bring forth a couple other initiatives to your attention for possible consideration. There's a program called Healthy Streets and Play Streets, which restricts the traffic from local roads and includes small traffic barriers, noting that streets are closed. And the goal of this type of initiative is to make it easier for communities to reclaim their local streets as places for community and reduce the total amount of unwanted cut-through traffic in certain areas. And this is of concern from a couple community organizations I had consulted with, because they had stated before the permitting process currently for the county to close a local road for events such as block parties or community events was incredibly strenuous. In addition, there is also the policy of reducing all local road speeds from 25 miles per hour to 20 miles per hour, which has been something that's been adopted by other Vision Zero initiatives across the country. Next slide, please. With that, that's the end of my presentation. I want to say thank you all to those who are listening and watching who have helped me throughout this process. Thank you to the council members for talking with me throughout, and to my supervisors and to my coworkers at the county council office for being such amazing resources. But yeah, I'm willing to take any questions now.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I was like, I feel like we need to clap. Okay, so now we'll open it up for questions. Just well done. Really appreciate the level of detail and the way that you tackle this. We'll go to Vice Chair Herrera first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your work on this. You know, we're a county, but we're a unique county that has city issues with traffic, and it's a really big deal, especially in my district. So thank you for taking a deep dive in this, because this is one of the things that always comes to the top when it comes to constituents, grassroots issues that people really care about. You not only identified the issues, you kind of came up with a solution to it, and we appreciate that. So I just want to thank you for that. So there's a comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Kind of surprised. Okay, I have two. So the first is, you mentioned like the petition portion of this with community feedback and people signing petitions, and you said percentage of. Is it a percentage of the people that like live on that street, or a percentage of like on a GIS map? What did you mean? Who's the population? Because if you're like doing the percentage of unincorporated Pierce County, 50% would be impossible. So.
It's the percent of the residents who would be impacted by the installation of, say, the traffic control device. So, for example, if there's a group of residents who petition on a specific like street section or a roadway section, and there's 25% of residents that sign on to that petition, that would be considered valid in Kitsap County as a large enough amount of residents to be considered a valid group concern.
Okay, and then, thank you, that's very helpful and sounds more reasonable, because when I was imagining it first, I was like, it's really hard to get even 10 people to sign on to anything, to let alone several thousand. So the second one is around the level 3 with the eligibility, the kind of the automated eligibility. Is it using those initial kind of, I'm going to call them the weighted scores that you had at the beginning that would kind of determine, or is there, who determines the eligibility of a project?
It could be that way, but the way that the city of Pittsburgh does it is that it's just a screening tool for, say, whether or not it's a local road or say it's an arterial road. So it's like the main bare bones features of the road about whether or not it's eligible to be even considered as part of the neighborhood traffic safety program in general. So it's not necessarily a prioritization thing yet. It's on that bare bones level of whether or not that road is eligible to be funded under neighborhood traffic safety in general.
Okay, which in our county, because we have county roads, we have private roads, we have city roads, we have roads that really aren't roads, but somehow they are. So that would be very helpful, because people complain about all kinds of things that we literally can do nothing about. So this would help us. We wouldn't potentially receive those complaints because the tool would say, oh, that's a City of Puyallup road, so you're trying to put in a report on something that's not our problem.
And it also has the potential to, say, redirect to certain resources. For example, if it was, they clicked on a private road, then they could redirect it to, say, a source that talks about the privately funded speed hump initiative that's under PPW.
Okay. Any additional questions? Well, I thank you. This has been a project that I think really will benefit all of us long after you're in your master's program or doing all the fun things that you're doing next. But really appreciate the level of detail here in the report you're leaving behind. And I know that staff has really taken a lot of this to heart and kind of created some next steps to help us think about how we potentially take some of these actions. It'll be interesting to have the conversation with Planning and Public Works about their side of it. I don't know if that was really at all part of your work, or you just kind of did the legwork. Did they give any kind of feeling to them now owning the work versus the council owning the work?
I didn't consult on that part, yes. But on other things, like say the use of the street vision tool, I actually had the ability to go to one of those like traffic calming evaluations, head with a county engineer to one of those traffic calming evaluations. And that's hard work, honestly. So like using those types of tools could definitely be beneficial.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so Jacob, thank you very much. We all wish you the best of luck in the next chapter. You're going to do amazing things, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at item C, which is an update from Ms. Connolly on the URA and where we are.
Thank you, Chair Hitchen. For the record, Mary Connolly, council staff. So as Chair Hitchen said in this presentation, I'll be giving an update on the Unified Regional Approach to Homelessness Project, which we also call the URA. Next slide, please. In my first few slides, I'm just going to cover some background information that should be a refresher, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page, as well as any members of the public watching. Next slide, please. Beginning in March 2025, there was a third-party consultant, Uncommon Bridges, which convened elected leaders from governments in Pierce County to design a unified regional approach to homelessness. This group is called the Elected Leadership Group, or ELG, and in April, the Pierce County Council Office took the lead on next steps to implement the URA design that the elected leaders put together. Next slide. The URA design includes a vision to substantially reduce homelessness so that it is rare, brief, and non-recurring, as well as a mission to empower Pierce County governments to choose locally responsive solutions to respond to and prevent homelessness, while establishing a county-wide framework that supports coordination and efficient use of shared resources. Next slide. The unified regional approach will have dedicated staff capacity to facilitate coordination across governments, provide technical assistance to governments, access additional resources and funding to benefit the county, and track and report on countywide data and outcomes. Next slide. The URA will be formally established via an interlocal agreement, or ILA. Participation by governments will be voluntary. The effort will be governed by a board of representatives from participating governments. Pierce County will serve as the administering organization and employer for staff. And for the first 5 years, the budget is expected to support employment of 2 to 3 staff members. Next slide. Governments that are interested in participating in the URA are encouraged to adopt a resolution that expresses their intent and commitment to launch a URA, directs staff to work with other governments to develop an interlocal agreement, and while an ILA is in development, commit to certain next steps. Next slide, please. So that brings me to updates since my last presentation to you, which was in early July. So Chair Hitchen and I have continued what we've been calling our roadshow to local governments to explain what the URA is and encourage them to consider adopting one of those resolutions of intent. Since my last update to you, we have visited the cities of Tacoma and Reston, which joins 5 or 6 other cities that we visited prior to then. Next slide. And then we have upcoming presentations scheduled in University Place, Fircrest, and Puyallup. Next slide. And since my last update, the cities of Lakewood and Gig Harbor. The cities of Lakewood and Gig Harbor have adopted a resolution of intent to join the URA. So that brings the total number of governments who have adopted a resolution to 4, joining Pierce County and the city of Fife. The city of Tacoma votes on their resolution tonight, And the city of Ording also has a vote scheduled tomorrow, and the city of Ruston will be discussing and tentatively voting next Tuesday. I'll also be back to the city of Edgewood next Tuesday to provide them with an update on the project since we last presented to them. So they're not considering a resolution yet, but want to be kept in the loop at the council level. And the elected leadership group set a goal of having at least 5 governments of various sizes adopt a resolution before beginning interlocal agreement negotiations. This was a minimum number to ensure that there was a kind of critical mass of governments and that this wasn't just going to be a Tacoma-Pierce County effort. However, we have 4, which is almost 5, and there isn't a cap on the number of governments that might participate. The elected leaders would love to see as many cities join as possible. So Councilmember Hitchen and I will continue our roadshow and working with the cities and supporting the adoption of resolutions as cities are interested in that. Next slide. In the next few slides, I'll be talking about some outcomes from the last elected leadership group meeting in July. One topic of discussion was how to use about $300,000 in remaining funding for URA implementation. You might recall that this funding was originally ARPA funding, and it remained from the council's contract with Uncommon Bridges, so it was unspent. In May, the council approved reallocating this funding as ARPA interest to be used to support URA implementation as directed by the council. So because the funding is now ARPA interest rather than ARPA, there are less restrictions on how it can be used, and it also doesn't have to be expended by the end of this year. So at their meeting in July, the elected leaders discussed how this funding might be used to support URA implementation. One idea that's been discussed by council is to provide funding to cities to support URA implementation. Elected officials were supportive of this idea, and they were also supportive of using the funding for other potential purposes like subsidizing URA member dues or future special projects. So staff are working with Chair Hitchen to draft a resolution for council's consideration to direct use of this funding in alignment with the feedback from the elected officials. Next slide, please. The elected leaders at their meeting also reviewed an updated estimated budget for the URA for 2027 to 2031. This estimated budget relies on certain assumptions that are listed on the right of this slide. It's expected that it will take some time to hire and onboard an executive director. So for this reason, there's an assumption that the executive director is hired halfway through next year, and that means the expenses for 2027 are less than $100,000. Expenses for 2028 assume that there are 2 FTEs, an executive director and a program specialist, to provide additional support to the collaboration. This would bring the total operating budget to just under $400,000 in 2028. And then this estimated budget assumes that an additional program specialist is hired in 2029 to support special projects. It's possible that a third staff person won't be necessary within the first 5 years, or that if there is one hired, that it will be more like in 2030 or 2031. So this is a conservative estimate financially to be budgeting that in 2029. As you can see, hiring a third staff person would bring total operating costs for the URA to between $550,000 and $600,000 per year. Next slide, please. And so then the ELG talked about how will this budget be paid for. They settled on the following approach, which phases in member dues from participating governments over a couple of years. In 2027, Pierce County would pay for the full operational budget. As noted on the previous slide, the costs are expected to be less than $100,000, and having Pierce County cover the costs would reduce complexities related to city budget adoption timelines. In 2028, participating governments would pay a small fee to participate, tiered based on their population, and Pierce County would pay for the rest of the budget. This gives governments the opportunity to try out participation at a lower cost while the URA is launched and get staff on board. And in 2029 and beyond, the budget is expected to be paid for by participating governments based on the population. So if you think of the budget as a pie and you divide it based on the population of each jurisdiction, that's how revenues would be split. Pierce County's portion would be based on its unincorporated population as well as the population of any jurisdictions that aren't URA members. So that means if jurisdictions join on later, that reduces the cost for Pierce County, but not other jurisdictions. Next slide, please. And then finally, the elected leaders discussed how long this interlocal agreement should last and determined that the initial length should be 10 years. As the end date approaches, the ILA can be amended to extend this duration, or the governments could allow the ILA to expire. And in the case that governments decide to extend the duration, this would provide a natural opportunity for the governments to determine if the ILA is meeting its intent, and if not, are there additional amendments that can be made to improve the agreement. Next slide, please. At the next elected leadership group meeting, which is on September 18th, the items on your screen are tentative agenda topics for this meeting. We're expecting to be able to review a draft interlocal agreement, and then potentially review a draft work plan for the URA board and staff for the first 5 years, and a draft job description for the executive director. Next slide, please. Also, just a reminder that at this website, you can find past and upcoming meeting materials for the elected leadership group meetings. And I've also been adding meetings, upcoming meetings where cities in Pierce County will be discussing or voting on legislation related to this effort. Next slide. And happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Connolly. We'll pause and see if there are questions from council members. Councilmember Morrell.
My question pertains to the due structure. I listened to an interview that Executive Mello did this past week with a radio group in Seattle, and he said they weren't asking for any money. So how does the dues play into this? Because obviously the dues means they're asking for money in the ILA. Any idea of how you're going to structure, like Ording? What is Ording going to have to pay?
Great question. Yes, I haven't listened to that interview, so I can't speak to that specifically, but the elected leadership group did discuss beginning in 2029, dividing the budget based on the population. So, for example, I think Tacoma's has about 25% of the population of the county, so they would pay for 25% of that budget. I do have a more detailed breakdown of what that would look like for other cities, such as the city of Ording. So I'm trying to find that while I'm sitting here. That's it for now. Chair Hitchin, do you have anything to add? And I'll just take a moment to pull this up.
I will add that we actually, at the last elected leadership group meeting, floated the idea of potentially the county being the one that's paying for the majority of things. And the elected leadership group really actually did not like that idea. They wanted to be part of it, I think in part because they wanted to feel like they were contributing financially, therefore had skin in the game and could direct things. Otherwise, the county just has control of everything. And so there was a real need to continue. And that was brought up by both a small jurisdiction and a large jurisdiction that there was a feeling of the idea of the on-ramp was floated in part because we had already budgeted for URA in our budget for next year. So it wasn't an issue for us to pick up that cost. And we weren't sure when the hiring. So if we're trying to write city budgets, they're doing that right now. So we don't know exactly how much it'll be. In cities, that's really hard for a city to do, especially our smaller cities that potentially are contracting out to get help. So we wanted to make the on-ramp for cities to be as clear as possible and make sure we really solidified what it is and how much it's going to cost before we formally are like, here's your slice of the pie. So that's why there's kind of that on-ramp, so we can get a fixed cost the second year and then the formally division of the full pie in the third year, which the board will have to approve how many hired entities there are, can't be more than 3, things like that.
And then I did pull up a new estimated budget based on that methodology or formula that was on one of those slides. So for the city of Orting, beginning in 2029, when the revenues are based on population, an estimate for the city of Orting would be 3,800 in 2029 for if only 2 FTEs are hired. So call it 4,000. And then if there were 3 FTEs, that cost for Orting would be about 5,500 for 2029.
Okay, gives me an idea, because since a lot of our youth prevention dollars were axed out of the rural areas, I got cities that are struggling to backfill their youth programs. And, you know, $5,500 goes a long ways in a small little town to support the infrastructure that they currently have, much less try to, you know, have extra dollars. So I'm just curious how some of these small towns, and in any of the discussion, I know you had a narrative at the beginning that said, you know, homelessness being non-existent, whatever. Have they talked about any outcomes on this URA as far as what's the expected outcomes?
That's a great question, and I think it's one that is asked often. And Chair Hitchen, do you have anything to? I think that it's an open question as to how exactly the success of the URA will be measured. I think that's a question we get often and hasn't quite been decided by the leadership group what those measures are, whether they're short or medium or long term. Chair Hitchen, do you have any other thoughts on that?
I think there's also a lot of thinking on what we're doing and not duplicating services that are happening in human services or in the city of Tacoma, but really being a central focal point of all the information so that we can then, as a group, go, here are programs that are actually reducing the number of days that people are experiencing homelessness. How do we guide governments to invest in those programs or expand those programs, and using that as a tool, and then really following the data and really spending the time to understand where are people slipping through the cracks, where are we failing, which populations are we failing, and having those really frank conversations. But the metrics themselves, we've left it wide open because the ELG group is not the board. And it's not I don't think it's the ELG's group to set the work plan for a board that some of us might sit on, but I don't know. This council will have to determine who's actually on the board, and each city and town that decides to join will have to figure out how they're going to appoint someone, and then that group will decide where the areas of focus.
Okay, then my other question is, we have the 300,000. What happens once that is gone? Are we depending on the due structure to now pay for all these FTEs?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then are you doing anything with the school districts?
Not in this process. I think that as we have gone to cities, we incorporate McKinney-Vento data because that data from school districts shows numbers around more like hidden homelessness of people who might be sleeping in their cars or doubled up with another family. And so that's another question that we've gotten is where do the school districts fit into this? And there's opportunity for collaboration between the cities and the school districts, the URA staff and the school districts. But at this time, the collaboration piece is really focused on how do Pierce County and the cities and potentially tribal governments work together.
Okay. And then the intent to participate, what does that mean?
The intent to participate is a resolution that where the council has the opportunity to say publicly that they are interested in taking next steps to adopt an interlocal agreement. Prior to this moment, or prior to a council adopting a resolution of intent, there have been elected officials from jurisdictions coming to these elected leadership group meetings. And there's varying degrees of if that elected leader was there because their council wants them to be there versus an elected leader coming to these elected groups because they're interested in it, but it's not as much on behalf of their government. And so if we as Pierce County are working on a contract with governments, we want to, in order for their staff at other governments to be able to spend the time on putting together an interlocal agreement and participating in those negotiations, they sometimes need the authorization from their full council and not just one elected official. And so so that's one reason. And I think another reason is it's an opportunity for governments to show other governments that they're interested. We've heard from some governments that at the beginning of this process said, we just want to step back and see what happens. And now that there are 4 governments signed on, they're re-engaging and saying, okay, come and give us updates. We want to know what's happening because like they didn't want to be first to the table, but they're still interested in being engaged. So it's kind of a dual purpose.
Okay. Has latecomers been talked about?
Do you mean latecomers to this process or to the interlocal agreement?
Either way.
Yes. Latecomer. So we will be presenting to the city of Fircrest soon, which is a city that hasn't been engaged so far. And so they're kind of a latecomer, so to speak. We also have been discerning the best way to engage with the Puyallup tribe. And my guess is that once we wrap up these next few presentations, we'll probably consider, are there any other cities that we haven't engaged with that we want to reach back out to? And then in terms of the ILA, once that is created, there will be a way for other cities or tribal governments to be able to join on later at any point during the duration of the ILA.
Okay, and your intentions are, since you brought it up with the tribal groups, they're going to pay into it too?
It's voluntary, so if they are interested, then they can. But we have to continue those conversations on their level of interest.
Okay. Then my last question is, I heard that there was possibility of a weighted vote on this when it comes to decisions. What is being knocked around pertaining to weighted votes?
Yes, what the elected leaders have discussed is having a governing board of elected officials representing participating governments, and there would be 2 seats for the city of Tacoma, 2 seats for Pierce County, and 1 for any other government that joined the ILA, and each person would get 1 vote. So that does give Pierce County and the city of Tacoma 2 votes as opposed to 1.
Okay. So obviously, is it going to be, when you do have these, is there minimum participation anticipated in this whenever a vote takes place? Or is it just who shows up?
There will need to be a quorum present in order for a vote to occur. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and that would be
Okay.
the quorum of the ILA holders?
Oh, I see. That's a good question. I think that should be discussed. I would assume if it's not written out, then it should be a quorum of the body. But that might be something to be discussed at the next elected leadership group meeting.
Okay, and the quorum, since Tacoma and Pierce County get 2 votes each, there would have to be quorums of 1 vote each beyond that? Or does Pierce County and Tacoma account for 1 for a quorum count?
I think we'll have to get back to you on that.
These are questions
Yeah.
that Ording's going to ask.
Yeah. No, I
So-
appreciate that.
I just trying to figure it out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I know we are going to be hopefully daylighting the kind of the initial draft of the ILA. And these are the kinds of things that we hope to embed in that document that then goes through a process of going to each council and feedback and all of that. So, Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. I had a question about the slide that goes over the executive director and program specialist roles. I'm curious from the ELG meeting how it came to be that those are the 2 roles. And I mostly am not necessarily concerned, but there's a big operational gap between an executive director and a program specialist. So I'm trying to understand what the thinking is there, and also how we landed on the numbers that we landed.
Sure. So this is an estimate put together by the council office, and there needs to be and will be further discussion with the executive branch, who have a lot more of those operational details and knowledge in their brain. And so in terms of why these were selected as an assumption, can you say more about what you mean about the operational difference between the 2?
Yeah. So just in thinking, the roles and responsibilities of an executive director traditionally fall under certain roles and responsibilities, and the difference between that and a program specialist is the gap is quite wide. So I'm curious what considerations there might have been for not necessarily an executive director, but maybe like a program director or something along those lines.
Okay. I might need to get back to you on that, or I can explain. I can explain that the executive director was envisioned to be somebody who would be leading this effort, working with the URA board, and managing 1 to 2 FTEs. And so, with that in mind, I looked to the human services division manager position as a potential kind of comparable pay scale. And then a program specialist would be supporting the development and operation of programs. But as I said, we do need to consult with the executive branch a little bit more. These are just assumptions for the purpose of getting a rough budget. So we should have more detailed numbers in the next couple of months.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any additional questions? Not seeing any, so I will just pause and see if there's any other business. Okay. Well, I'll mention it because it was supposed to happen yesterday, and then we got distracted, and then the person who was supposed to mention it is not here, and the other person that was supposed to mention it is not here. So yesterday you had flyers at the dais for the Bridge to Hope. The hope is that maybe you will get them out into your council districts if you know places where they can be distributed, put up bulletin boards, community centers. If you could just make an effort on behalf of the vice chair and Councilmember Denson, they're very excited to fill the Narrows Bridge with people, but also fill the room for people receiving training on this, and then community coming and talking. And Vice Chair, anything to add to that?
Thank you for mentioning it. Well, I stepped out for a minute, but again, we just want to fill the room. It's important work. A lot of work's coming into this, and we want as many people as we can get there to get exposure to this. I don't think any county has ever stuck their neck out to do something like this at the grassroots level, and really proud of the work, and I'm excited to see everyone gathering for this.
Okay, well, thank you both for your leadership on that, though I know Councilmember Denson can't hear us because she's not with us in the room anymore. But seeing no other business before us in study session, we